welcome to this episode of Mosaic Days, where we talk all things education, including student achievement and outcomes, professional development and training, and division and discord, fractions and frictions, schema and schisms. I am your co-host, Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith, and that sounds like a whole lot of words that don't make sense. That was a lot right there.
It's
translation. Math. I know. I was going to say, I hear some math words in there.
Yeah. What is on our agenda for today?
Well, so Ed Week publishing magazine articles. It came out a couple of weeks ago with an article that was titled, I have the exact title, "Debates over Math Teaching Are Heating Up. They Could Affect Classrooms." And so really we're here today just to talk about that. And we're here to talk about just this debate over math teaching.
Is this, I try to figure out if this is real or is this just a way for people to start talking about math? And we saw that the science of math is trying to mimic or parallel the science of reading movement. And I'm wondering if this is kind of just orchestrated to bring math to the forefront again. I mean, we know nationwide students have been struggling with math. We know nationwide students have been struggling with language arts. So I'm wondering if it's just trying to buy some time or some attention, pulling away from the science of reading. I'm a little frustrated with all this stuff because. It's funny because this is timely for us because we start talking about evidence-based practices. Well, what the heck does that mean? And are people just saying that now so they can obtain weight to whatever their agenda they're trying to push? So this is perfect timing for me. I've been talking about this now probably for the past month or two. EBP. Well, what is the basis for us? If we attach the science of learning to something, does that legitimize what we're trying to do?
Well, so they're talking about the science of, and you had mentioned the science of reading, the science of math. So let's talk about this whole notion of what is the science of math, because that actually, I don't know. It's been an argument that's been going in there, and they're just saying that it has taken place for a long time, right? And it comes with what you were talking about, the performance of students in math, and noticing that in our country, we have been historically lower achieving in math than other countries.
Shouldn't it be the math of math?
I kind of feel like that.
Why is it the science? Why is it the science of math? Shouldn't it be the math? I don't want the science of math. I want the math of math.
But at the end of the day, it's the approach of math, how are we instructing students? And there's all these arguments. So today we're going to be talking about, there's two different sides to the argument. And then there's the people that are in the middle that feel like you need both of the arguments. But this whole notion of science and math and what you're talking about, where they talk about evidence-based practices, I agree with you. Who decided that something is evidence-based? Is it researchers? Is it actual practitioners in the classroom who have done trials and studies? Or is it just people kind of sitting at the college or university level researching this and deciding, that they know what's best for kids?
We know, we've talked about this for years now. We know I have a problem with people telling teachers what to do.
Yep.
Whether it be administrators, coaches to a certain extent, CDE, whatever, or university researchers, professors. I have a big problem with some of this top-down approach. Unless you're in the classroom directly working with students, not, hey, you need to do this with students.
Yeah.
And so what we've talked about now, as it becomes more clear to me, a lot of people know what they're supposed to do. It's easy for me to tell you this is what you teach, regardless if it's inquiry-based or direct explicit instruction, which we're going to get into in a second. I can tell you what you're supposed to do. Can I do it in the classroom, working with students? I'm a big proponent of we need to get our hands dirty. We've been so far removed from the classroom as administrators. We need to understand that struggle. I think there's two struggles we need to understand as administrators and as instructional leaders. We need to understand our students that struggle and put ourselves in those positions. Mm-hmm. And we can. And we need to know how our teachers struggle with instructing our students. And we can definitely experience both of those. Until we do that, it's hard for me to listen to anyone telling me or telling teachers, this is the way you're supposed to teach.
Well, and you have to look at your student population, right? So, I mean, that's one of the things that we, are these researchers going out and finding a wide range of students with various needs, English language learners versus, lower socioeconomic status versus students with disabilities versus, GATE, gifted and talented, high affluent populations with lots of parent involvement. It comes down to, that's great. And I agree with you that, this is how you're supposed to do this. But what works for one group of students and one teacher may not work for other groups of students and another teacher. And so, I think it's just hard I think there's something around guidance. This is a strategy you can use with this type of learner. This is a strategy that you can use with this type of learner. But ultimately, just to say like one way or the other, this is how we have to do it. Yeah. I just don't know how anybody could actually stand on that if they are not in the classroom with that particular class of students.
Yeah, I'm not listening to anyone that's going to tell me what to do that hasn't done it in the classroom themselves. So we're talking about the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics, NCSM, was ultimately, wrote a piece about the science of math movement and basically ripped it apart. That's what they did, right? Yeah. They took that website, and we've had a chance to look at the website, and you got to see both sides of it. Their claim really is, well, these are special ed teachers and these are psychologists, and these are the ones that are saying how we should be teaching all students when their scope is very limited. The psychologist one, I probably would have a problem with it because the psychologists, unless they were credentialed as a teacher, haven't instructed. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm really trying to understand about who's going to tell me what I should be doing. And have you done it? Mm-hmm. I do not want to hear someone mimicking a strategy that they read in a book or a strategy they learned in a college or university course. I want to see someone that's a practitioner in the field that has had success doing this. Those are the people I want to hear from. Because if you haven't done it, and again, I don't think I'm in the minority. I think teachers get frustrated with these types of conversations because unless you've done it, who are you to tell me to do it?
Yeah. So, and you had mentioned that it was special ed teachers and psychologists. Yeah, I think so. Wasn't the majority of them? They were actually like special ed researchers and psychologists and some teachers. So then you had also people that are just researching this, and I talk about this.
What does that mean though? We use these terms, research and evidence-based, and what does that really mean? I think fortunately or unfortunately, the Hattie book, Visible Learning, has pulled a lot of weight over the years about this meta-analysis of research articles there, and the citations. But when I look at it, is can you replicate the results with different populations? Like, what population does this work with? So, if you're going to look at it from a science standpoint, there's supposed to be guidelines on what makes an experiment, right? These are experiments. What makes these experiments valid? I'm not sure if people are going through that process. I remember when we took our research courses back in when we did our credentials. You have an AB model. You have an ABA model. You have a control group, an experiment group. I'm not sure that people are setting up trials to look at some of these instructional approaches to determine that they really are research-based or evidence-based. Like, what does that look like? Is it one classroom? Because that's not gonna. Is it one classroom in Iowa that they did this intervention on? So I'm very skeptical with a lot of this. I think ultimately, again, we talk about, is this going to change the way we do business in the classroom? Probably not. But there is a clear divide happening here between this NCSM basically ripping apart this website that promotes the science of math. And really the two camps are we looking at inquiry-based learning? Or are we looking at explicit direct instruction? And so, it's kind of a silly argument because I think any reasonable math teacher thinks you should probably have both in the classroom and you should be fluid in that. I think the NCSM is basically saying, hey, the science of math people are saying only direct explicit instruction. And that's not, if you're going to just limit yourself to that approach, that's not a very good way to teach math.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the science of math, if we really get into it, because I want to do a deep dive in this, And just kind of adding on to what you just talked about, when we had the special ed researchers and the school psychologists and the special ed teachers coming together, they are also, like you're saying, one group that are looking at how students learn best. Are they looking at that full range of students, like you were talking about, the gifted and talented, the English language learners? And some might argue, well, what's good for special ed is good for everybody. And that's not always the case. Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it's not the case. But basically, it's the fact that it is explicit instruction. The teachers are supposed to explain and model those new concepts, and then the students practice, right? So it's that, like,
it's the old school.
It's the old
I
school.
do, we do, you do, right?
We do, you do. Exactly. Okay.
I do, we do, you do.
I do, we do, you do. Yes.
Right.
And then repeat as needed, right? And then pull little groups as needed, right?
That's the gradual release of responsibility.
It's the gradual,
model,
exactly,
right?
is what I was going to say.
That's not, and so the other camp is probably more of a constructivist approach, where students construct meaning by interacting with the material.
Yes. And so that would be the other one where I was talking about the inquiry based, right? So there's a lot of arguments, though, that if you don't have the foundation of math, and you don't have those basic math number sense abilities, and we're talking about like your addition facts, your multiplication facts, the foundation of how you calculate things, okay, and the process. If you don't have that, how do you expect children to go in and actually be able to solve a problem?
Yeah.
Right? So that's the whole argument. So this one's like, oh, just let kids go figure it out, do problem solving, collaboration, inquiry based.
What's the kinder method where they just play around?
What's
where they just exploratory kids learn what they want to learn?
What is that? Experiential learning.
No, but it's named after someone.
Oh, I don't know.
Shoot, it's gonna remember. I feel like this should have been a 3-part series because we're already halfway through our time.
Yeah,
and we really haven't scratched the surface of this. But I mean, I think the supervisors of math organization, they're trying to. We talked about this. What is the purpose of math?
Yeah.
Why do we teach math in school? And my argument has always been, we are a language-based society. On a day-to-day, your typical person on a day-to-day basis probably doesn't use math that much. I know that's not a popular opinion, and people are going to say, well, that's not true. But in general, when's the last time you needed to find the area of a circle?
You don't.
When's the last time you had a right triangle and you needed to find the hypotenuse and you used the Pythagorean theorem?
No, it's you don't. And that's the big argument is are we approaching math in a way, or math curriculum in a way that is real world application?
There is no, but when you start looking at higher math, and we're taking a look at maybe secondary math, none of that applies to the world.
No, and unless you're going to be an engineer,
unless you're going to be an engineer, unless you're going to be a mathematician, an architect, you work in construction. If there's something where math is a skill you learn that you need to use on a daily basis, then that's all fine and dandy. But the average person, we have our phones, we have our calculators, we don't do any of that stuff in our head anymore. I would say language, we use language on a daily basis.
Yes.
We're using language now. We're reading, we're using language now. I mean, we have to write regularly. So, and I understand the importance of math. I'm not saying that we don't need math, but I think at some point there was another movement saying once we got to the high school level, we should have different pathways. And if you're going to be a scientist, then you need to take IM1, IM2, calculus, whatever that sequence is. And if you're not going to be a science or math person, then you would do lighter. Like us as teachers, we did the light math pathway in college. Why don't we have that opportunity for high school students to do the light, some statistics, some type of math that's going to be applicable to whatever career you think you're going to go into. Instead of saying you have to do IM1, you have to do IM2, and if your district requires 3 years of math, then you got to do IM3. You look at that textbook. This is my argument, and it's a very easy argument. And if we gave IM1, the middle of that book, a unit test to our teachers and our administrators who aren't math teachers, I guarantee you people would struggle with that.
Absolutely.
So I can't grasp the concept of if we can't do it, we're going to expect our kids to do it.
Yeah.
And we're all master's degree holders at minimum, right?
Yeah.
Some of us have EDDs. Some people don't want to do math. I don't like the council's approach of kids need to develop a love of math.
Yeah.
I kind of have to push back on that a little bit because the whole exploration thing of it and the joy of math, some people enjoy math, some people don't.
Yeah.
We need to make kids successful in it, regardless of whether they like it or not.
Yeah. Well, and I look at myself because when I was growing up, math was really hard for me. And that's one thing that they talked about a lot is that, there are certain students that are able to really grasp math concepts really quickly. And then there are others where it takes a little more time and they need different approaches to problems. They need to see it in different ways, right? I was one of those kids. And so I just remember that it wasn't until I actually was able to memorize facts and understand the core understanding that then I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And now I'm willing to do it, right? But in terms of application, how much do I normally use it? I'm getting out my phone, like I said, I'm calculating if I need to. I'm understanding, percentages and how to calculate something. But ultimately, I'm not making these big decisions in my life based off of math, right?
Yeah.
And so when they talk about this and they talk about us having to take this approach with different students, I think you're exactly correct that there needs to be different pathways based off of what is applicable to the future of where these kids are going. Similar to a CTE track, how are we getting kids into an area that they love where there's application and there's courses, that are applicable to that. I mean, I remember however many years ago, like when we were going through college, it was like, okay, we should have a course on rent and the process of like how we're spending money, in real life, how we're balancing a checkbook, which none of us have checkbooks anymore, how we're, understanding property tax if you purchase a home, we don't do any of that stuff to prepare kids for the future.
I believe that's coming though. What, financial literacy, is that going to be a state? Is that a state mandate in the future? It's
supposed to be in the future. And I know that like my kids right now, they do have in middle school a financial literacy track that they keep them on and they kind of keep them on, but it's all voluntary. It's not like a required thing that the kids are doing right now.
Technically, and would it fill a math requirement, right?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, why are we not developing courses where it's actual application to real world concepts?
Yeah, to shoehorn in the quadratic equation into a real world, it's not really applicable, right?
Exactly.
But if we have a financial literacy and that counted as a year of math, that would be real world experience and kids using real world experience, like creating a budget or looking at financing, taking a loan out for a car and what that looks like.
Like a lease on a vehicle and, I'm doing a down payment or, doing the interest on a loan and how does that work? Those different types of things. And that's what, there was a survey that was taken in 2023 that they were talking about from parents and teachers. And all parents and teachers were like, we need real world application for math. That was what they ultimately did. I don't think they care whether it's explicit instruction or it's inquiry based,
And I think, I mean, ultimately, and I'm not sure as special educators, as we've been for most of our careers, the modeling, the explicit instruction, to me, you can't do without. You have to do direct explicit instruction. I'm not quite sure how you would do an inquiry based or exploration. And again, I think, and I've done some work with math over the past couple of years in the classroom, and it's got to be a mixture of both. But at some point in time, you need to do some direct instruction. Kids need to see you model problem solving. It's a metacognitive approach. It's visible thinking, right? We need to be able to show them how we think through the process so they can mimic and they can adopt that. For us to think that you can start out and kids just figure it out. And I get the concept, productive struggle, perseverance. I get those concepts, but that has to be in a well-constructed environment where there are safety nets involved in place, because I think people get turned up. Let's face it, people get turned off to math when they've been unsuccessful. People start feeling negative emotions about math because they've gone through struggle with no success, or a repeated struggle or repeated failure. And we haven't provided those safety nets to support students. When people tell me I don't like math, as a teacher, I'm like, oh my gosh, this person has experienced struggle and failure repeatedly over a long period of time in order to feel negative about mathematics. It's that those teachers haven't done a good enough job to work with the students, right? Because I teach in my classroom back in the day, we all fail. And, we have this conversation regularly on the show and off the show. I fail regularly, and I have to be okay with that. And I have to go back and figure out how well I can make things better. Whatever the situation is, I made a bad decision, I made a wrong decision. How are you going to course correct for that? So the notion that kids fail and have a negative emotion with that or a negative reaction to that, and then prolonged failure, and then you become ambivalent to failure because it just has happened so much, it loses its impact. That I say we've done students a disservice in that. And so how are we taking, whether we do direct explicit instruction or this exploration, this inquiry based, where kids are kind of hands-on with teacher guidance, how are we providing those safety nets in place? And when does a teacher intervene, right? When does the teacher course correct? And so that takes planning. This cannot be incidental. Again, I keep on saying we have to plan these lessons so that when we start seeing that struggle, we monitor it and then we support it. Because if it keeps on going forever, then kids ultimately do give up. And we've seen that. In general ed, special ed, whatever class we see, we've seen that. So how are we supporting that student learning?
Well, and ultimately with that productive struggle, that's great and dandy and all. But if a kid is seeing everybody around them get it, and it doesn't connect for them, you have complete emotional shutdown at times. And if that kid continues to struggle, you may have increased the behavioral issues, and the thing that frustrates me, because I see my kids come home with math right now, elementary and middle school level. With elementary, they have to teach one approach, and it's just wackadoo. I mean, I look at this and, I was an elementary school teacher, and what they're doing now at Common Core is they're saying, okay, now we're going to spend a whole week on this one approach to solve this type of problem. But it may not connect for a kid, but that kid has to sit there for a week and try and figure out, like, this doesn't make sense for me. How am I going to do this? I mean, the division problems that they have to do, where they have arrows and they have, things around and they have boxes and they have hashed, and I'm just like, this is crazy. And so oftentimes I will tell my kids, this is just the direct, explicit instruction on how to solve this long division problem. And it makes sense for them.
But why are we even teaching long division though?
I know.
No one's doing long division. When's the last time you divided 1,353 divided by 28?
All the time. I do it all the time. Just for practice. I get
frustrated because why are we even teaching that?
I know.
I feel like, and this goes back to something you said earlier, when you have those kids who get it and the kids who are kind of struggling to get it and they get kind of left behind, kind of goes back to this whole notion, what I'm going to say, the concept of mastery.
Yeah.
Which I think is not good for education. Every kid has to master the standard, which realistically isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
We push that if you don't master this concept, you are a failure. You are not successful. This is why students attach emotions to learning, because this kid gets an A and this kid gets a D. We value this kid's learning more than this kid's learning. Well, maybe the D is good for this student because everyone learns at different rates and everyone has different abilities. We can't say everyone has to get an A in this class.
Yeah.
And that's mastery. That hurts kids in the long run.
Absolutely.
Because if you have this expectation here of every kid's going to master, and the kids here, we value this kid less than this kid.
Yeah.
It's a perception that teachers reinforce. It's a perception that schools reinforce. And it's horrible to the development of a student who's going to be a C student. We had those kids in school. We had those kids in our classroom. We have A students. We have B students. We have C students. It is the norm curve. And I know that's out of fashion still these days. But if you take a look at the distribution curve, kids are going to be everywhere in between there. So this concept that every kid has to master the standards is hurtful to that kid who gets a C, that kid who gets to a D. We hear it all the time in some of our meetings from year in, year out. A parent will come, my kid needs to be assessed. Well, why? Because I have an older child who's a straight A student, and I have this kid who's a C student. This kid must have a learning disability. And I'm like, no, That's not the way this works.
Yeah.
That kid is a C student for some reason. Maybe that's what the kid's going to be, a C student, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. For us to think that everyone has to be a 4.0 or now with AP classes beyond 4.0 is just, it's dangerous to education. It's dangerous to student development.
Mm-hmm.
It's dangerous to student trying to belong in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a danger to society. We got to get rid of this notion of mastery.
And when you talk about science of reading, kids, but kids, or the whole science of language arts, kids are, when you look at an essay, they're hitting mastery in their own way, in their own expression, in their own language development. In math, the expectation is you have to have the exact same answer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So you could take a kid that has an essay and look at their development over time, and then, that the teacher is using a rubric and making it into, different, they got a 4 in this area, 3 in this area, 2 in this area, and a 4 in this area. But, the next time they did that essay, they hit 4, 3, 4, 4, right, in this rubric. Whereas math, it's like, did you get that answer in that particular manner?
Yeah.
In that approach? It's like you don't have that ability to have that individualized process for kids. So again, let's go back to science of math. I don't think that there's a science. I mean, they're basically saying it's a very prescriptive process, and they have to get that mastery, like you're saying, on that one way, that either explicit, because in query based, that's basically based off of they're gonna take their own time to figure it out and to collaborate and to problem solve and to use all of these different techniques, which you could talk about metacognitive strategies for that, but they still get to the same exact answer.
Yeah. So do we want, again, it's hard for me to have these conversations at times, because inevitably I go back to why are we teaching math?
Yeah.
If we're teaching math because we want kids understand procedures, are we teaching math because we want to develop creative problem solving and critical thinking skills, and we're doing it in the context of numbers? I think we could do that without the context of numbers. Yeah. I mean, what is really the purpose of math? And I know that the hardcore math teachers are going to be, we want kids to love numbers and love math and find the joy in problem solving. I don't know. I don't know if that's what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. I do know that as a teacher of math back in the day, and still doing some of the work that I do now with students and staff, that I want direct, explicit instruction. I want to try to build concrete representations of what we're doing. I want to make sure I'm teaching algorithms. I want to make sure that they understand that all of this abstract problem solving that we do can be tied to a concrete objects and make those connections. And they need to be handheld some of that way. There's always opportunity to play. Even at the high school level, I want kids to play around with the materials. But then ultimately, I need to teach algorithms, when to use them, how to ensure that they're using them appropriately, and for them to be able to look at it in response saying, this is how and explain that, using language to say, this is what my thought process was. The best way for me, I think, to do that is through modeling and using like transparent thinking, like think aloud approach for kids to do that, and to proceduralize it with discrete steps so that they can mimic that and then be able to take that and apply it to new problems.
But that is the foundation. You're building the foundation of their understanding of how to move through this. And especially if you're modeling some of that, that's that explicit instruction, right? With then the opportunity for maybe the inquiry afterwards, but you still have that foundational piece of helping them understand the algorithms and how to work with the numbers, and modeling it, having them practice, having them do it on their own. That's all foundational. It's almost like you can't skip the foundation before you move into the rest of the design of the house.
You know how difficult it is, and we're looking at general ed classes, 25, 35 students, sometimes 40 students in a classroom. When you look at the behavioral approach to learning, and you have 35 kids in the class, and I start making an error, and I start making an error, and I'm still making the same error, and the teacher rotating the room doesn't catch that error.
Yeah.
Now this kid has an opportunity to have done that same error 8 times. Behaviorally speaking, once a kid has committed that error repetitively
That is in the
That
head.
is the way he
Yes,
solves the
that is
problem
correct.
now.
That is correct. You
So
are
without
exactly
a
correct.
modeling approach, without saying, that gradual release, without doing that, I do not want any kid to repeat an error repeatedly, because now it becomes part of their behavior. And so, again, I think you're right. Foundations, memorization, algorithms, laying that foundation first will get you to the ability to look at some inquiry-based learning where the kids can explore and persevere. But there's got to be a foundation first, I think.
Because once you get to high school on our level, if you're just sitting there like, okay, go figure out this problem, use your tools and your knowledge and whatever you know, the kids that are really bad at math, that don't have the foundational knowledge, that have skipped that for so many years, are just sitting there like, what do I do?
And you have behavior problems.
And then you have behavior problems, right? And those are the kids that are going to check out. Those are the kids that are not going to perform well. Those are the kids, you've got to have that. And this kind of speaks to what you're doing. I don't ever think that there is a wrong time for students to, if they have not learned that foundational process, to start that process. Even as 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders, ideally we want it in the elementary level where they are learning their foundational math facts. But even if they haven't, if they could just get that approach, even in high school, that's they're going to use later on in life.
Yeah, this needs to be an 8-part series. I know. We didn't even touch.
I know.
We didn't even touch a lot of
There's
these
all
cards.
this notes, but I think it's an ongoing debate. I think, and what kind of, in just reading all these resources, this has been happening for a long time. They've been going back and forth with this for a long time.
I think we take a look at the scores nationwide for math, and they're not very good. So something's got to change.
And it's continued to decline, apparently.
Yeah, something's got to change. And again, it's what are the practices that are in the classroom? I don't want to, some of this stuff kind of frustrates me, because if you're not in a classroom regularly, then how can you even begin to talk about this and write about this? If you're not working with students to see growth and success and failure and learn from that, how can you possibly comment on the state of mathematics in the country?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's a tough one. I wish they had a course of financial literacy for me, because I still don't understand all that stuff.
What stuff?
Like owning a home and down payments and loans and
financial literacy. I think Newsom passed that mandate. I think,
I think it's important. I think that's understanding tax and how taxes work and how property taxes work. Why my property taxes are so high. I mean, these are the types of things that I would have wanted to know a long time ago.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to have to look at doing a second and third part to this sometime in the future, because I think it's something that we need to definitely explore and come up with some possible solutions. But I think we probably need another episode or two, sometime in the future.
All right, we'll tackle it.
All right, this has been Mosaic Days. I'm Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thank you for joining us.